Welcome everyone to Runecast Solutions Back to School webinar series. Today's topic is hybrid and multi-cloud security and compliance. My name is Wade Carlsen, and I will be your presenter today. Um, a little bit about myself. I've been in the IT industry for 30 plus years. I played many different roles in that 30-year period, but primarily in the virtualization space. So I was a VMware system engineer, design architect for several years with Fortune 500 companies. I got started as a Windows Server administrator. I hold several industry certifications, but that's not really all about me. I just wanted to cover, my extensive experience working in these environments, up to the point where, we were really working on, going from on-prem cloud infrastructure to leveraging some of the newer service providers and the cloud service offerings. So I understand the complexity that comes with that from an operational perspective as well as security perspective. And so today, really, this is just going to be a 30-minute discussion about what that means as far as running hybrid environments. Especially these days where people are branching out. Back in the day, you would have maybe on-prem and a single service offering from like AWS or Azure in a couple of instances. Now, today, that's really expanded, and people are making use of multi-cloud offerings. So you can find yourself, hosting services in Azure, Google, AWS, some other, third-party cloud providers, etc., as well as people, really taking advantage and expanding even upon that with Kubernetes and container um, infrastructure and implementation. So that's the topic of today: is to understand, from not only a VMware perspective and running VMware in those environments, but also, understanding the security needs and risks, and ultimately at a high level what needs to be paid attention to ensure that you are comfortable in understanding your security posture, as well as those types of things that need to be taken place to ensure that you are compliant, that you're closing vulnerability risks, and so forth. So, this is just a high level abstract. Again, understanding and managing security and compliance in our hybrid and multi cloud environments can be challenging. That's to say the least, right? Challenging is not even a good enough word for it. We have multiple environments. A lot of times we have multiple tool sets. That leads to the next point. Organizations are spending enormous amount of time, and SEs, whether they're security focused or operations management focused, are spending enormous amount of time, gathering data from these multiple environments, understanding, configuration details about those environments, leveraging tools that will do certain things in those environments, like vulnerability assessment, security compliance, reporting and audit tracking, and those types of things. But most of these tools are single solution options, right? We still, we haven't really breached into and I know some companies are starting to do that. Runecast has certainly been on that trend for some time now, but breaking out of a single solution mindset, right? Where it's just a patching solution, or it's just a, operations management or monitoring solution, or it's just a vulnerability scanning solution, or just a security compliance solution. Runecast is one of those products, if not, a leader in the industry in providing a single solution set for all of these environments, and giving you not only visibility, but giving you proactively understandings about your configuration where you have risk. and allowing you to resolve those things so you don't experience those issues and outages that come up. So at the end of the day, let's try to make sense of it all. This is a 30-minute session. That would be impossible to cover every security angle and aspect that you could think of when it comes to hybrid environments. But I picked some of the key items that are probably some of the highest priority, right? The reason I mention that is we're not going to dive into network security and firewalls and things like that. You know, in a hybrid environment, especially in the cloud, we do have, some reassurance that the providers are going to be, providing some of those things, right? So I'm not really looking at it from a cloud perspective as an infrastructure perspective, right? That should be handled by them. But we also know that there's a dual level of responsibility when we're subscribing to cloud services, in that it's a free will environment, right? They provide you with the capability, whether it's compute, database, whatever, but it's free will. You can take that, modify the configuration, customize it to fit your organization and needs. And that's where it comes into where we have to have things that can analyze and check those configurations, ensure that we're not introducing risk. So I've already felt like I've said risk so many times in this call, but that's the biggest thing. And that's what it all leads to. When you talk about security, vulnerability assessments, best practice adoption, is if you're not following certain standards, your environment is at risk. But so the first item on this, risk assessment and compliance. Hybrid environments, how do you do that? Again, generally, if you're in AWS, Azure, on-prem VMware, you have some operating systems. Generally that's 4 or 5 different tools that are going to do risk assessments and compliance checks for you. Identity access management. This is another thing where we have to, what's the best way to put it? If you don't allow access to these systems, nobody can use them, right? So identity and access management becomes a huge thing in who has access to what type of permissions do they have. So best practices comes into play with identity and access management, following the vendor's recommendations on how you should have those things configured, and flagging those things when you're outside of that spec. Security automation and orchestration. So, at the end of the day, we're made, whatever tool we're using, hopefully we're made aware of the vulnerabilities and compliance gaps that we have. How do we fix them? Right? There's got to be a way to, um, provide remediation, and that's another key piece of this. And the compliance with regulatory requirements. This is becoming more and more, I guess, from my conversations, critical and important. It always has been, but it seems like it's more of a topic now than it ever has been. So, what sort of security standard is your organization either required to adhere to, or they simply want to adhere to? Is that CIS standard, or is it PCI? Is it HIPAA if you're in healthcare? Things like that. And then ultimately, once you get a handle on some of these items and you have some data, how do you keep that environment and your environments um, secure and safe and healthy? The only way to really do that is to do continuous auditing, continuous compliance checks, things like that. Um, Asset management is another piece of the puzzle that often gets, especially in cloud environments, because it often gets forgotten about, right? Especially in cloud environments, because we're paying, some provider to provide us with the infrastructure and all of the compute resources and all that type of stuff. And so we generally think of assets as something that they own and they have to worry about, and we don't. Well, we still have to worry about it, right? Because if any of you are in the cloud, you understand every asset they align to you, you're paying for, right? So from our perspective, we have to understand what those assets are, how they're configured, right? Continuously check on those and then verify and validate that they're secure, they're healthy, and remove those assets that we're not being utilized to their full potential and things like that. So, could be a cost saving measure in there as well with asset management, but ultimately understanding what your assets are, how they're configured, if they're secure or not. And then IT operations management compliance. And what I mean by that is a lot of times, almost all the time when I speak to somebody and you mention compliance, especially vulnerability assessment, which granted, vulnerability assessments generally align directly to security. But when I talk about ITOM compliance, it's the operations management piece that can be security related, but also operational related. So you meaning configurations in your environment that can lead to outages, downtime, performance degradations, things like that. So, you know, we're, as we're looking at and trying to open our eyes to our security posture, we also have to continue to make sure our operations management space is good and healthy as well. Because, downtime's downtime, right? Whether it's an actual attack or it's some sort of misconfiguration in the environment that brings the system down. Um, so these are some of the main areas of what we need to talk about, and why I'm here today to discuss this. I've already mentioned Runecast already. That's the company I work for. Runecast Solutions is a single solution that can help you with all of these things. So everything that I've mentioned prior to this slide can be handled and help you manage your environment from a security and IT operations management perspective, as well as vulnerability assessments and configuration management. So that's a mouthful, I know, but Runecast is expanding constantly our product line, expanding into the different areas of what we are able to analyze, look at, and provide feedback for. And you can read through some of these things, and these are main highlights of what Runecast does. Um, but again, single solution, right? You don't have, a dozen or so tools out there. You're logging into different monitoring consoles and different types of things, and combining reports from several different areas and pushing that report up to management to let them know what your current health posture is and all that type of stuff. Single solution. So you can look at your hybrid environments as a whole and see where your vulnerability stance is, your security compliance, and how you're stacking up, provide reporting for the upcoming audits, do self audits and checks to see how the overall health of the environments are, etc. So I'll get into that a little bit more on detail, but this is just a high level where Runecast is. Um, what does Runecast support? This is a list of what is currently supported by Runecast. AWS, I've mentioned a lot of this stuff already. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Kubernetes, operating systems, and VMware. Runecast got started as a VMware analytics solution. So that's kind of been our bread and butter. Um, we're over 8 years old now. So we've expanded into these other areas to bring our product, and I'll show you how the product operates in a minute, to bring it to the forefront of being a single solution provider. And these are all of the services within the offerings that are supported within the Runecast Analyzer. I highlight operating systems. This is one of the newer pieces of our product to where we are doing operating system scanning, because historically Runecast has always been an infrastructure level um, analytics solution, if you will. And everybody also has operating systems, and we're continually asked, when are you going to support the operating systems? So we do now. So we can scan Windows, Linux, regardless of where they're running. Okay. They can be, bare bones physical servers. They can be in a virtual environment. They can be running in the cloud. It doesn't matter. We can scan and analyze those. On that note, as an industry first, we're able to do Linux OS scanning on AWS agentless based. Okay. No agents to be deployed. Otherwise, we have to deploy agents. And you'll see why in a moment. Our next step is going to be able to support Windows and Linux running on VMware workloads. Okay. Agentless. So we're taking the step to get completely agentless in our Windows operating systems. And I highlight that because everything else you see in here is agentless by nature and naturally to begin with Runecast. So API based. All right. We're not deploying agents to AWS, Azure, your VMware hosts, or anything like that. It's all connected via API and so on and so forth, which leads me to my next couple of slides of okay, this sounds all great, but how does it work? Let's get a picture of this. And this next picture might blow you away a little bit just because it's very complicated. But this is how it works. And the next slide, I have a simplified version of this, but I do want to talk on this slide for a moment. Um, so how does it work? Runecast basically gets deployed um, three different ways now in which you can deploy Runecast. Historically, you would deploy Runecast as a virtual appliance on-prem in your VMware environment. That's how probably 90+% of our current clients have us deployed and how they use us. You can also deploy us from the marketplaces in those cloud provider areas. So you can provide, deploy it that way, run it in the cloud. And we also have a new SaaS offering. So you can sign up for the SaaS offering, let Runecast as a company run the appliance for you. Regardless of how you choose to deploy or use Runecast, the functionality is the same. Okay. There's no differences. You don't get, a couple better, different features with an on-prem appliance versus a SaaS offering, etc. Everything that you see in here is included, regardless. And ultimately, from that appliance, we have a built-in patented rules engine. So that's our AI, right? Our artificial intelligence. So what Runecast is doing is we also, go out and we kind of scour, if you will, for lack of a better term, scour publicly available sources of knowledge and sources of truth for things like security compliance, vulnerabilities from the CISA organization, um, those vulnerability risks and whether they've been exploited or not from the CISA organization. Best practices from all of the vendors that you see on this slide. We pull the best practices in from all of those vendors. All of these security standards are included. We're up to 14. We're continually adding more. So regardless of vertical that your business operates in, we have a security standard that should fit and cover you. What's nice about Runecast is all of these are included with your licensing price. We don't sell you one or two and then uplift you and sell you the other ones. You get everything, and you can pick and choose which ones you want to scan your environment against and see where your compliance is against those standards. Um, Many of our clients will have more than one of these enabled. You can enable or disable them in settings, but a lot of times, if companies take payment, credit cards as payment, you got PCI. If they're in healthcare, you have HIPAA. CIS is a great standard across the board. If you're running VMware's security hardening guidelines. We have some European standards. We are a global company, so things like Essential 8, Australian government. We have DORA, TSACs, some Turkish standards in here, different types of things. But ultimately, this is how it works. And once you have the analyzer, you're simply targeting really management systems of your overlaying and underlying infrastructure. So from the appliance, you target your vCenter server for VMware. For AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, you target your cloud accounts that contain all your configuration data for everything that you're running in those areas, right? For VMware, like I mentioned, vCenter, the vCenter database contains all your configuration data of your entire environment, right? So all we're doing is targeting those management systems and then extracting and looking at configuration data, pulling it back to the analyzer, and then measuring it against um, what we've parsed as far as the knowledge parser listed here, and ultimately those sources of truth of how you should have things configured and where you might be at risk. And this all happens. This slide makes everything look extremely complicated. Runecast Analyzer is about a 15-20 minute deployment process. you target your environments. Then once you're up and running, you click a button, and within a matter of minutes, you have results based on a scan of your entire environment. So this looks complicated. It's extremely easy. Simplified version of what I just showed you. Again, we're pulling in these sources of truth and information and data. We're parsing that knowledge. We're embedding it into a definition database built within the analyzer. And then we're scanning your environments that you're targeting. So if you're running Kubernetes, we're looking, connection to your API server, Windows and Linux. Again, depending on where you're running and how you're running, it's either agent-based or agentless, but we're scanning those and showing you security compliance, vulnerability assessments, etc., as well as your VMware, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, and Kubernetes. So again, a single solution to cover all of these environments to where you're not logging into multiple different things, generating several different reports and trying to correlate and combine the data for a single report. Runecast Analyzer can kick data and reports, and we've gotten very good at customizing reports as far as the data you want to see. Okay. And it's simple within the product. Click, basically you're filtering and segmenting the data on how you want to present that in your report, and then clicking a button, generate a report. So this is really ultimately, again, single solution. The nature of Runecast is to proactively make you aware of your configuration and where you have risks, where you have areas you need to pay attention, etc. One thing I haven't spent a lot of time on here is configuration management as well. So Runecast will report your configuration down to the most minute detail and level, report it to you, as well as give you the ability to track changes over time and report on who's making those changes. Okay. You can also select a baseline configuration and see how your other objects in your environment are different from your baseline. And this is all single click of the button type of activities, matter of minutes, you can understand your environment. Again, a 30-minute session, that's a lot of information and data, but I just want to pause here for a moment and open it up to see if anybody has any questions so far on this session. One last thing I want to note is, of course, by function, Runecast is a very deep product and expansive for all of these environments. So to do the product justice, we recommend, schedule a full demo with us. And we'd be happy to do kind of a deep dive and show you the type of results Runecast will produce, the type of, scheduling, alerting, all these types of things that you can configure within Runecast, and go deeper and talk about your specific environment and how Runecast can help you. So I'll pause on that note and I'll open it up for a Q&A session. See if anybody has any questions for me. For a very limited time and only during this webinar series is Runecast offering a 14-day unlimited license. So we're calling this a trial, right? For 2 weeks, you can download our product and get the full version of the product to where you can analyze your environment and see all of the issues that Runecast is reporting. How that's different than our normal trial is generally we'll give a trial and about 25-30% of the data is viewable. This is a full trial. You can download it, you know, run it in a lab, analyze your VMware environment, connect it to your cloud service accounts, analyze your cloud, et cetera, et cetera. But for a limited time, we're offering that. So do take advantage of that, because this is something I've been with Runecast over 4 years, and it's the first time I've ever seen them offer full licenses for a trial period.
Okay, we have several questions in the
Okay,
chat
great.
and Q&A. So Javier asked, AHV Acropolis is supported?
Nutanix on VMware is supported today. We don't support AHV yet. And I say yet because that's been a topic of conversation as of late. So that's something that we could look forward to in the future. But today we don't support AHV.
Thank you. Marcus asked, does the appliance support internet proxies to access the central repository?
No, not in that method. However, Runecast does have full REST API. So I get what you're saying to access. You can, depending on your environment, you can access the API, and any data that Runecast stores or collects is available via API call. And we have extensive help in the API in those Git commands, etc. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thanks. Another Javier asked, where can I see the prices? Is Runecast a SaaS product available in clouds?
Yes. So yes, we have the SaaS offering. So yes, you can align and subscribe to our SaaS offering and target your cloud infrastructures, regardless of vendor that's providing. And as far as pricing, we have some pricing available on our website. So if you just visit runecast.com, there's some drop downs in there that can give you a feel on pricing. And if you want a customized quote, we'd be happy to provide that as well from our sales organization.
And a question by Ovidio. It's a little long question. It says, a question about enterprise networking. Can VMware manage enterprise transport layer like Verizon slash Lumen slash AT&T dedicated fibers? CDNs like Akamai or Cloudflare, and edge computing. How Runecast is managing the configuration, regulatory compliance, security audits, and operational management of these resources. Thanks for the excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you for the feedback. So one thing Runecast is unable to do, because you've seen so many things that Runecast does do, is get out into the networking layer, right? So we're not able to analyze your physical network switches, your network components, things like that. There is some coverage for things like pure storage. I know that's different than networking in your question, but as far as other capabilities, we're able to analyze, certain SQL instances in the cloud. We're able to analyze pure storage, vSAN, things like that. So storage related, yes, to a point. Networking, we don't really cover. There's so much in the networking world. We're not able to do that today.
All right. And Javier again says, can Runecast apply remediations automatically or manually for the findings slash recommendations to modify cloud and on-prem resources?
Absolutely, and that's one thing I touched on remediation. I know I didn't really cover it because limited time. Yes, every finding that Runecast has and is able to discover, we will provide you with a text remediation explanation. Okay, that's step one. So we're always telling you how to resolve it, and it's based on your configuration, so it's relevant to you, right? It's not how somebody else across the world resolved it. It's how you need to resolve it in your environment. That's one. Two, we have over 500 checks and findings today. We're constantly adding that we build a script for you. So we'll provide the remediation script that will address those objects that we're finding that need a configuration change. And in essence, provide you the script where you can download it and go run your script during your change window. So yes, remediation is a big thing for us.
Great. So Javier says thanks. So these were all the questions. Does anybody else have any questions? This was really a great session, and thanks everybody for coming.
You just echo Diana. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I appreciate it. Hopefully, this was helpful. I know it was quick. There's a lot of data to cover. Again, would love to hop into a separate session, go for like an hour, and just discuss your environments. Look at Runecast, dive into the appliance and Runecast Analyzer, and show you the remediation, show you the types of data that you get. Runecast provides severity levels and what you need to look at to help you prioritize the findings and things like that. There is a service manager integration piece. I know it was in one of the slides. I didn't highlight it, but we integrate with ServiceNow, so you can automatically generate tickets in ServiceNow from Runecast findings as well. So, on that note, again, everybody, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate your time. I know it's valuable. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.